It's a great topic. A great topic.
What's our topic?
Okay, so Chris asked the following question, which I love this question. Is anybody above the law? Specifically, are friends, families, and contributors of the President of the United States above the law? Mm-hmm. Now, under Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, the answer is unquestionably yes. They are above the law. Because Article 2, you know what that article is all about?
Are you talking about the presidential pardon?
Yes, I am. Exactly. So, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 says ... because there's a bunch of stuff beforehand. And he, it's funny that it says he, right? And he shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. It's really broad power of giving reprieves and pardons, right?
It is.
Now, just before we get into this, I want to just make sure everybody knows what a pardon is and what a reprieve is, okay? So a pardon is presidential clemency, and basically it wipes out all the consequences of the conviction. So technically you still have a conviction, but you don't have any of the ugly consequences like you can't get a gun. You know, there's voting issues. There's licenses that you can't get when you're convicted. With a pardon, it's a clean slate, okay?
Get out of jail free card.
Yeah, it's more than get out of jail. No, yeah, free, exactly.
Free and clear.
Right. Now, a pardon, a presidential pardon, applies to convictions. It also applies to accusations. You can do anything before today. If I pardon you today, I can pardon you back for anything that you've done before. And a good example is Biden just pardoned his son. We're going to get to that. But he pardoned his son back to January of 2014. So anything he did, which is a federal crime before January of 1st of or after January 1st, 2014, he doesn't. We can't prosecute him for it. He's free and clear. That's a pardon. And then there's something called a reprieve, which basically means you're in jail for something and you get out. Like, you know how you said get out of jail free?
Yep.
It's get out of jail mostly free.
Okay.
Because you still can't get licensed and you can't, any of the felony conviction stuff that's going to hurt you, it still hurts you. You just get out of jail, right? Okay. So anyway, so those are the pardons. And by the way, one more point, background point before we start, is it's just for federal crimes, right? So if there's a state crime, the president can't pardon you for that, can't reprieve for that, but the governors can. So governors have basically the same rights as the president does, but with respect to state crimes. Because remember, there's federal crimes, then there's, I wouldn't even say below, state crimes, because you know, there's certain things that the federal government has the rights for in the Constitution, and then there's the reserved powers for the enumerated powers for the federal government. The reserved powers are for the states. Like a lot of murders and rapes and robberies and thefts, they're all state crimes. Yep. It can also be federal crimes, but if you're convicted in state court, the governor can pardon you. If you're convicted in a federal court, the president can pardon you.
Got it. So,
getting back to it, are you above the law if you're a friend of the president?
Yes.
It appears you are, right?
Absolutely are.
Right.
Without a question.
That's the scary thing.
What was that, Chris?
I said no question, yeah.
Yeah, no question. But the thing is, why are there pardons? Have you guys ever thought about why we have pardons? And by the way, I know the answer to that is yes, because we've been talking about it for the last 2 hours. Right? Off camera, right?
Right.
That was going to be my question.
Yeah, why? You tell me why you think, Chris. Why are there pardons?
Well, I thought I see a lot of examples of reversal of wrongly convictions of, you know, like for Joe Biden, he returned a lot of people who got convicted of small drug possession laws. So I thought it was...
Wait. Those were actually small marijuana possession laws,
marijuana
right?
Possessions, yeah. I thought that was, you know, the reversal of something.
They're trying to, like, create an environment of justice where maybe an injustice was done.
Yeah, I thought that was the initial goal of it. I'm not sure in history.
What do you think, Brandy?
Right. If the judicial system messes up, then the president's allowed to come in and say, okay, our judicial system failed. And instead of going through that all again, we're going to just pardon it.
Yeah, and by the way, let's not forget another thing called checks and balances, right?
Okay.
The legislative branch makes the laws, right?
Yep.
The judicial branch adjudicates the laws and also interprets the Constitution.
Yep.
And the executive branch, the president, enforces the laws, right?
Right.
and there's checks and balances. So each have their own powers, right?
Sure.
This is kind of like an overstep, right? Because now the president is saying, yes, your job in the judiciary branch is to adjudicate, but I'm going to step in on this one, or this 100, or this 1,000, or this 3,600 in the case of FDR. How many pardons did FDR do?
I have this.
Chris, you're the big brain of this team.
1 second.
FDR. Now, it might be a little bit skewed because he was the president for 4 terms.
So would you say this is like a double check on the checks and balances?
Ooh, is it though?
Is it? That's what I'm asking.
I mean, it's kind of like one is superseding the other, right? So the judiciary does its thing, the presidency, the executive branch does its thing,
Yeah.
and the legislature does its thing.
Yep.
Now it's like the executive is doing the thing of the judiciary. They're not checking the judiciary, they're doing the thing of the judiciary, right?
Right. Right.
But in a way, so I read, while he's checking that out, I read some stuff about, remember, the Constitution of the United States is in the late 1700s, right?
Right.
And they're just getting out of a king, right?
Yep.
They had King George, right? And they're trying to avoid that sort of thing, and they're trying to make this constitution. But the king in England had pardons, right? In fact, I think the phrase, I beg your pardon, that is like you bump into somebody, I beg your pardon. In other words, excuse me for this, right? Even though I did it, please excuse me for it, right?
My bad.
My bad.
Over 3,600 pardons. You listed 3,687 pardons
For FDR.
for FDR.
Yes, that's a lot of pardons. I think he's the most.
He's the most, yes.
Yeah,
Granted
so-
more pardons than any U.S. presidents.
Yeah. And now, again, he had 4 terms, right? Yeah. But so the King of England gave pardons, right? It was kind of like the king could wave his hand and you're free, no matter what you did, right?
Okay.
So then it comes here, and they're still, even though they're trying to break free from the king, can you imagine it's the late 1700s, they're kind of always been under a king, right? They still have king on their brains, right? Even though they're trying to break free, they got some king on their brains, right?
Right.
So what are they doing? They say, we got to have a pardon. I mean, because what if people get emotional in the judiciary arena and it becomes unfair what happened? It's unjust what happened. We need somebody that's dispassionate, right? Non-political. 'Cause remember, George Washington was non-political, right?
Right.
Now, and he was involved in this whole thing, right? We need somebody above the fray that can use, objectivity and correct wrongs. Right? Right.
Right. I know.
Well, no, that was
presidential pardon.
Right. Yeah, let's do it now.
We'll get him.
Yeah. Now there were discussions about having the Senate have to review it, but their attitude was no, because we don't want the president to be slowed down. There was a big fear of treason, right? And there'd be an overthrow, right? Because it's brand new, it's a new government. They're like, is this even going to stick? So they wanted the president, somebody said they wanted the president to be able to cut deals with insurgents that might be trying to overthrow the government if they back off and join up with us again, and did not want to have to deal with the Senate approving it, because then there'd be too many emotions with the Senate, right? So then they create this exception, which is impeachment. So you could do pardon for anything other than impeachment. And people were saying, yeah, but what if there's treason, right? What if the president's part of the treason? Then they said, well, if that's the case, we'll impeach the president, and that will solve that problem. So we don't have to worry about them pardoning themselves for treason, because we'll impeach them and they can't get out of it for impeachment, right? You can't pardon somebody for impeachment, right?
Right.
So anyway, we got big pardoners like FDR, and I think there was one guy who pardoned 0. One pardoner.
William Henry Harrison.
Yeah, now I don't know how long Harrison was the president for. That might have been one of the presidents that died after 2 weeks or something, right?
Let me look it up.
And didn't have a chance to pardon. Yeah, see how long Harrison was the president for. But anyway, so you have pardons and reprieves. So the question is...
From March to April.
March to April, okay, yeah. He was only the president for a month.
Yeah.
Or he would have pardoned family members, friends, women that he wanted to date, all kinds of pardons, right? So, anyway, so So you can only do federal crimes. You can't do anticipatory clemency. Like, Brandy, if you do something in the future, I'm pardoning you for that too, right? Yes, finally. Too bad I'm not the president. But I would do it for you. But anyway, you can't pardon for future activities. It can only be pardoned for past activities, right? And you're supposed to be accused of something. At least that's what all the commentary says. But Biden just pardoned his son for anything back to 2014.
Not even accused. I thought you had to be convicted.
No, just accused.
Just accused.
And there was discussions about that, which is if you had to wait until they were convicted, you couldn't solve injustices in many cases, right?
Okay.
So no, you do not have to be convicted. You don't even have to be formally charged, I guess. But some of the commentaries did say accused. Now, it's a little fuzzy as to what that means, particularly since Biden just pardoned Hunter back to 2014 when none of his convictions go that far back. I think the one that we found, the events were like 2016 and 2018, convicted in 2024, right?
Yeah.
So we don't know why he went back to January 1st of 2014.
When he was a drug addict. So
Right. Who knows what he did?
In case he did other things that come out.
Federal things. You can't pardon for state things, right? All right, so then the other question somebody asked me when I was talking about this is, can the president pardon him or herself? What do you think? What do you think, Chris?
That doesn't sound. It would pass.
Doesn't sound cool, right?
No, it wouldn't be. I feel like that's so.
Would it be inappropriate?
Yeah.
In the words of Peter Pan, it would be bad form, right?
Bad form.
Right?
Bad form.
Bad form. So what about you, Brady? Can the president pardon him or herself?
I don't see why not.
Because, again, and he shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in the cases of impeachment. So you can't pardon yourself for impeachment.
Right.
Right? But you can pardon yourself for, I guess, any of the underlying acts that you're convicted for.
Has this happened?
Well,
No, they haven't. They haven't pardoned for a president has never pardoned him or herself.
Okay.
There's never been a she yet, but
a president has pardoned a previous president,
which is who?
Richard Nixon,
Who was pardoned
and
by
by.
Gerald Ford.
Thank you.
Right?
Yes.
No, because we were reading about that before, but that's interesting.
That's reason number two, though. That has nothing to do with what we were talking about earlier, which was the judicial mistakes.
Right. So,
Right?
okay, so remember, the president's above it all, and they're supposed to be watching out for the welfare of the country, right? Now, you mentioned that Biden pardoned a bunch of people with small marijuana charges. Mm-hmm. And maybe his argument to himself was, well, it's not illegal anymore. Ironically, maybe, I never know when to use the word ironic, but I think ironically, the federal government, it's still illegal. Marijuana is still illegal under federal law.
Which is why they needed the pardon, right?
Because it was federal law.
Right.
But all the states, but the question is, it's still illegal under federal. Like, I could see doing like a governor's pardon of people who were previously convicted and are serving time for marijuana charges now that the law's been changed, right? But that's not the case with respect to Biden pardoning these small marijuana charges. Mm-hmm. But anyway, the example you were going to give, what did they say about Ford? Do you remember what they said? Now, I have an advantage over you because I have it sitting right in front of me.
Hit me, Tom.
Okay. So basically, Ford pardons Nixon. Now, Nixon was not impeached, right? Nixon resigned, right? So it's not an impeachment situation. It's the Watergate scandal, the wiretapping and that sort of thing. But
that was a good point. I like that pardon.
Well, your point, the reasoning that he gave, you like, which is our long national nightmare is over. He said that it reflects his desire to put the politically and socially divisive effects of the Watergate political scandal to rest. Let the country heal, right? Because otherwise, it would have been a long trial. It would have probably been over a year or 18 months or something. It would have been a big divide for the nation, right?
Divisive. I think dividing the country, if you can solve a divisive country with a pardon, do it. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so that would be a good reason for a pardon then, right? If it's something that's because you're trying to look out for the best interests of the country.
Yes.
So if you're going to divide the country because of this issue, it's worth considering a pardon for, right?
Yep.
Or if there's a situation where there's an emotional outburst and people are afraid that if this person's not convicted, there's going to be mayhem, right? So they convict somebody, and maybe they didn't do it, but it's like you're a scapegoat almost, right? And in cases like that.
Yep.
But the question is, should we, right? So this is the late 1700s. We are a different nation now.
Should we what?
Have a presidential pardon.
Oh, okay.
Because think about what's happening in federal case, because it's the same in state. It's governor's pardons, right?
Sure.
Somebody's arrested by the police. Step number one, the police think you did something.
Okay.
Now, you're innocent until proven guilty. I totally support that, right? But you've been arrested, right? Number two, you're convicted, okay? Now, you're convicted by maybe a jury of your peers, maybe a bench trial, right? It might be a judge. And the judge is overseeing this. So there's two types of trials in criminal law. One is a jury trial, and one is a bench trial, right? And the defendant has the right to a jury trial, but they might waive that right and say, I want a bench trial for various reasons, right? So either the judge is overseeing a jury trial or actually ruling on a bench trial. And these judges are, typically lawyers, right, that became judges, that spend no time on the bench and they're thinking about judgy things, right? Like how to resolve these conflicts, right? Within the law. They're really good at the law, hopefully, right?
Okay.
And they decide they're guilty. So you've been arrested, now you're convicted, okay? The police officer's really good at figuring out if people did something wrong, but they're not foolproof, right? That's why we have a court, right? And then the judge figures out they're wrong, or the jury says you're guilty, right?
Okay.
Next step is an appeal. If it's in the state court, you go to the appellate division. If it's in the federal court, you go to the appellate division. Different names in different states and different names for the federal government. But now even less or more, is it more dispassionate or less passionate? But anyway, there's people who are separated. They're even more removed from the events. They're not even in the same city a lot of times. Like in New York State, if you're convicted in Buffalo, New York, your appellate division is in Rochester, New York, an hour down the road, right?
Okay.
And if you're convicted in a federal trial court, you then go to the federal circuit courts, which could be in another state because they're regions all over the country, right?
Okay.
So now you have people who are trained on being appellate division judges, right? And they look at all the evidence and they decide you're still guilty, right? Okay, and they're trained for this stuff. Then there's another layer of appeal. In the states, it's called usually the state Supreme Court, except weirdly in New York State, the state Supreme Court is the lowest court, and the New York State Court of Appeals is the highest. But in the U.S., it's the U.S. Supreme Court, right? Now it goes up again. Now you've got even, I hate to say smarter because there's probably some really smart judges in the lower courts too, but judges that are really trained and tuned on analyzing all the stuff that was put into evidence and figuring out if it was a fair trial, right?
Okay. Time out. I want to interrupt you for a minute.
Sure,
Can
please. Yeah.
So, in order for a president to pardon someone, does it have to go all the way up?
No, they don't even have to be.
You don't have to
They don't
appeal.
even have to have a trial.
They don't even have to have a trial.
No, they don't even have. Yeah, there's.
So it's not like you have to appeal, and then
then
fill
go to
out
the president.
all this paperwork to get a pardon.
No,
the
you
president can
well,
just,
especially if you're like the president's son or family member or
they didn't
friend.
go through any of
Yeah,
those
yeah,
steps.
but remember, you don't. It could be offenses that haven't even been convicted yet, right?
Right.
So, but in the cases where you have convictions, you have all these layers of
Checks and
lawyers and
balances.
judges checking one another, making sure it was fair.
Yeah.
And then finally, at the end of it all, the president's like, wave of the hand,
Yeah.
you're free.
Yeah.
It just seems inappropriate.
It seems.
It seems like, oh, by the way, do you know I think at the time I read this article, there were 46 presidents, right?
Okay.
Only 27 were even lawyers. That's like almost 50% were not even
Does that
lawyers.
make you feel better or worse?
I mean, they're not even trained on the law, right? Much less constitutional
And yet
law.
they get to have the presidential.
Yeah, I mean, some of
presidential
these
pardon.
candidates for president when you listen to these debates, they don't even know what the Constitution is, right? They certainly don't know enough about the Constitution and the laws, it seems to me, to weigh in on this. Even giving an opinion, to me, would be irrelevant, other than Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, which gives them this, seems ridiculously powerful rule, right? It's too much power for them. Doesn't it seem like that?
So it does, but there's got to be some. Okay, so let's put some rules and regulations. What we would
Not
say.
yet. Not yet.
All right.
Let's first give some examples.
Okay.
I want people to be more emotionally pissed off before we set these rules in place, okay? Because they're not angry enough. The 1.7 million followers of our show are not angry enough yet, right? So let's get them pissed, right?
I don't like people to be angry.
Oh yeah, but they're gonna be angry. So, and by the way, we're not politically biased at all here. Honestly,
No.
I don't like any side of this political arena, right?
Yeah.
So let's just look at both sides, okay?
Okay.
So that we don't get anybody thinking we're slanted one way or the other. But we got to start with Hunter Biden, right? Because it's so fresh, it's so raw, right? So Hunter was convicted of 3 federal felony tax offenses and 6 misdemeanor tax offenses in September of 2024. Now, I'm going to emphasize that, in September of 2024, okay?
Okay.
Also convicted of federal gun charges in June of 2024.
Right.
Do you know why I'm emphasizing 2024?
No, why, Tom?
You do know why.
Tell us.
No, you tell me why. Merrick Garland is the Attorney General,
Right.
the head of the Justice Department, right?
Yes.
This is the person appointed by Joe Biden. And by the way, previously appointed by Obama, right?
Right.
This is Joe Biden's guy, right? So he has appointed this guy. Now, I'm not saying that Merrick Garland is biased, but if he's going to be biased, he's not going to be biased against Biden, right?
Right.
He's probably not biased at all.
Right.
But he's certainly not biased against the guy that appointed him, right?
Sure.
So when Joe Biden comes up and explains his reasoning, he says that his son is being unfairly treated by the Justice Department for political motivations. That's his guy. That's his guy that did this, right? Merrick Garland is his guy.
Right.
So if he's politically motivated at all, and I'm not saying he is, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he's neutral. He's not in favor of Trump, right?
Right.
He's going to be on the Biden side.
Unless he's in favor of Trump now because he knows who's coming into office next.
But he's not going to get picked by Trump. Trump's going to put his own guy in there, right?
You're right.
So Biden coming out and saying, I'm afraid that he's being mistreated because he's my son. I mean, and the fact that he had an illegal gun, he evaded taxes, all these other problems.
He lied about his drug use. When
Yeah,
he got the gun.
right. Yeah. But that's the funny thing. But now, just because we don't want to be slant one way or the other here, let's go to Trump, a couple of his pardons, okay?
Okay.
Trump, and we learned this by reading that book, Revenge of...
The tipping point.
by Malcolm Gladwell, right?
Yes.
Philip S. forms. Now, a long description of Philip F. forms is in Revenge of Tipping Point, right? He gives a whole thing about how this guy basically, and by the way, this is a conviction. This is not just Malcolm Gladwell talking. He basically scammed $1.3 billion out of Medicaid and Medicare, okay? He was convicted in April of 2019, and he was sentenced to 20 years in prison, okay? Federal court, so the president has power over it. And Gladwell gives the impression that Philip F. Forms was bragging about contributions he's made that will protect him, right?
Right.
But we couldn't find them when we searched them tonight.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that's what he said in the book,
Referenced
right?
In the book, for sure.
That he was bragging to his friends that if anything bad happens, I've made political contributions, so I'm good, right?
Yeah.
But again, we couldn't find it in the 8 to 12 minutes that we searched on Google for it, right?
Correct.
So anyway, he gets sentenced, 20 years in prison for Medicaid, Medicare fraud. And it's an 8-week jury trial. So it's not like it was a 1-week kangaroo court. It was an 8-week jury trial, right? That this thing goes. So all the evidence is coming out, right? He's convicted of like 20 federal counts, right?
Yeah.
So it's not one thing. It's like
Yeah.
20 things. And here's a couple quotes that I love. For nearly 2 decades, Philip S. Forms bankrolled his lavish lifestyle with taxpayer dollars, paying bribes with impunity, and robbing Medicare and Medicaid by billing for services that people did not need or get, said Assistant Attorney General Brian Benskowski, right? It's a credit to the tenacity of our prosecutors and law enforcement partners that the man behind one of the biggest healthcare frauds in history will be spending 20 years in prison. Here's another thing. You got to hear this. Philip S. Forms is a man driven by almost unbounded greed, said Deputy Special Agent in Charge Denise M. Stemman of the FBI's Miami field office. The illicit road S. Forms took to satisfy his greediness led to millions in fraudulent healthcare claims, the largest amount ever charged by the Department of Justice, okay? Along that road, S-Form cycled patients through his facilities in poor condition where they received inadequate or unnecessary treatment, then improperly billed Medicare and Medicaid, taking his despicable conduct. Wait a second. Further, he bribed doctors and regulators to advance his criminal conduct and even bribed a college official in exchange for gaining admission for his son to that university, okay? So $1.3 billion Medicare Medicaid fraud, okay? And he's convicted in April of 2019. Like, how much worse does it get, okay?
He's a bad dude.
He's a bad dude, right? And he's ripping off taxpayers, right? And he's screwing patients, right? He's, I mean, how much worse does it get? So in 2020, Donald Trump commuted his sentence.
Wave of the hand.
Wave of the hands, exactly. So he's out. He's out. Oh, and then, by the way, soon after getting out, didn't he have like a domestic dispute that he got arrested for with his wife or something, or his ex-wife?
Yeah.
So anyway, but the worst part is, again, I couldn't find this when we searched it, but I thought Gladwell said he bragged to people about how if he ever gets caught, he's good because and guess what? He is good.
He is good.
Right? He got out.
Wow. Yep.
So anyway, here's another great one, though. We got to do one more on Trump's side because this is so much fun, right? Rod Blagojevich, right? Blagojevich, the governor of Illinois from 2003 to 2019. I'm sorry, 2009. So he is convicted. He gets a 14-year sentence for like 17 counts of public corruption and wire fraud, okay? Gets convicted by a jury. But the best one that he gets convicted of is, so Senator Obama becomes president in 2008, right?
Okay.
When the senator becomes president, he gives up his Senate seat. The governor is allowed to fill that seat pending the next election, right? Okay. So Blagojevich.
Tell us what he says.
Oh, yeah, it's great, right? He's overheard on a recorded phone call saying, I've got this thing, and it's fucking golden. I'm just not giving it up for fucking nothing. It's a fucking valuable thing. You don't just give it away for nothing. If I don't get what I want, I'll just take the Senate seat myself, okay? So it's a scandal, right? He's a bad dude, right? He's corrupt. I mean, we pay him. I mean, we don't because we live in New York, but Illinois residents pay this guy a salary, and he's using and abusing it. He wants to sell the Senate seat, right? And I remember way back when, we didn't look at this tonight, but I remember when it was happening, and I think it was like $100,000 he was trying to get for the seat, right? So anyway, so then, and I'm wondering to myself, why did Trump, pardon this or commute this guy's sentence? Because he had like a 14-year sentence and he served like 8 years. I'm like, why did he commute his sentence? He was a Democrat. Blagojevich was a Democrat. Okay. And it just didn't make sense. Okay. So then my good friend Mike Sabatka, on the way to the podcast today, calls me and we're talking and he goes, he appeared on Trump's Celebrity Apprentice for 2 months in 2010, March and April in 2010. So he's one of Trump's guys, right? So I was thinking there had to be a connection somehow, right? But then here's the funniest thing. Trump says, yes, we commuted the sentence of Rod Blagojevich. He served 8 years in jail, a long time. He seems like a very nice person. Don't know him. Trump told reporters on Tuesday. But he was on the Celebrity Apprentice for 2 months, right? He goes, don't know him. So, again, we don't want to have sides here because we're not Republicans favored. We're not Democrat favored. We're just bringing it out, right?
We're moderates.
Yeah, we're moderates, right? So, Bill Clinton, right, a Democrat, so he's got this thing that's called Pardon Gate, okay? Because he pardoned like 450 people, a third of which were on his last day in office, right? It's like the midnight appointments from, wasn't it John Adams that did the midnight appointments to the federal bench?
Yeah.
The night as he's leaving, he's writing them as fast as he can, right?
Yeah.
So he does all these pardons. It's called Pardongate. So here's one, though, that's important. Mark Rich, okay? Mark Rich and his partner Pincus Green were indicted on 65 criminal counts. And I got to read a little of this because it's great, right?
Okay.
Including income tax evasion, wire fraud, racketeering, and trading with Iran during the oil embargo at a time when the Iranian revolutionaries were still holding American citizens hostage, okay? The charges would have led to a sentence of more than 300 years in prison, okay, had he been convicted on all counts. Anyway, at the time, it was the biggest tax evasion case in U.S. history, okay?
Okay.
Now, it's worth mentioning that we're facing a massive debt crisis, right? We need people to pay their taxes, and he's got the biggest tax evasion scam in history, okay? Now, learning of the plans for the indictment, Rich fled to Switzerland. His companies eventually pled guilty to 35 counts of tax evasion and paid $90 million in fines, although Rich himself remained on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitive lists, okay? It's getting worse, right? For many years. Narrowly evading capture in Britain, Germany, Finland, and Jamaica. Can you imagine? We're chasing this guy. Like, we have operatives out there going, and they're almost catching him, and he just gets away, right? So this is a bad dude, right? So, fearing his arrest, he did not even return to the U.S. to attend his daughter's funeral in 1996. So this guy he's really bad, right?
Scum.
So, now, one important piece of information that I haven't given you yet. Mark Rich's wife was a huge financial supporter of the Clinton Presidential Center and Hillary Clinton's U.S. Senate campaign, which occurred in 2000, okay?
Okay.
On January 20th, 2001, hours before leaving office, U.S. President Bill Clinton granted Rich a controversial presidential pardon, waved his hand. It's gone, right?
Not a bad dude anymore.
He's good. Now he's a good guy. He's like in Boy Scouts. He's living his life all over again. He's a good man now.
God.
This is a good man because the president waved his hand, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So by the way, not to be forgotten is Roger Clinton, right? Bill's brother,
Okay.
Roger Clinton. Every family's got a fuck up, right? And I fear that I might be the fuck. No, I'm kidding. I'm not the fuck up. I hope I'm not. No, my siblings are pretty good though. No, my siblings are pretty good though. Hey, I host Thanksgiving now, so I'm like the star of the siblings now. But anyway, so yeah, he pardons his brother. January 2001, on the eve, it's like the midnight pardons, right? On the eve of his departure, he pardons Roger Clinton, who had cocaine possession and drug trafficking convictions, and he had served time in federal prison, but now he's pardoned. He's good. He's no longer involved in drugs now because once the hand is waved, not only are you clean, but you don't have those problems anymore, right?
Wow.
You're perfect.
All better.
Until the next day when you're still on drugs or when now you're attacking your wife like in the S-Forms case, right? So with all this in mind, you think people are pissed enough about the presidential pardon yet?
I think so. I think so.
Okay, we got to have a couple solutions, right?
Okay.
I'll just give the first one, which is amend the Constitution to eliminate presidential pardons altogether.
Get rid of them.
Yeah, and by the way, just so you know how to amend it, an amendment may be proposed by either by Congress with a 2/3 majority vote in both the House and the Senate, or by a constitutional convention, which is called for by 2/3 of all the state legislatures, right? A proposed amendment becomes part of the Constitution as soon as it's ratified by 3/4 of the states or 38 states, okay? So it's a big lift to get an amendment to the Constitution, but what do you think about just dumping the
I disagree.
pardon altogether? Chris, what do you think?
Go ahead.
Are you in favor of just amend the Constitution and eliminate the presidential pardon?
I mean, ideally, yeah, but what about? It seems like
What about the emotional situations?
like public interest. There's like people pushing money in. It's hard to see.
Wait, you're saying we should or shouldn't get rid of it?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, we definitely should because it seems like it's causing a lot more harm than in actual good, because it seems like people are just abusing the power.
Okay, but now,
Time's
Brandy,
up.
go
I'm
ahead.
going to tell you a story, okay? Can I tell a story?
Yeah.
Here's the story. When I was 13 years old.
Is this story going to require a presidential pardon?
No, but it's going to give you a perspective.
Okay.
The deal is, here's my thought on the presidential pardon. Just because we're not using it correctly doesn't mean we should throw it out. We should make rules
So don't throw
around
the baby out with the bathwater.
That's one way to say it, right? But if we're misusing the presidential power, we should put restrictions on it, not necessarily just throw it out. My parents gave me a Game Boy on Christmas, and we were fighting over the Game Boy. My mother stopped at a gas station, took the Game Boy, and gave it to the people in the car next to us. She just took it away. Maybe she could have put rules around it so that we could still have it and learn from the experience. Maybe we have learned from the presidential pardon.
I like what you're saying.
Yeah,
in other words, don't throw it out.
Don't throw it out.
Because now you were sad about the Game Boy, right? But the people in the new car were happy, so it was a zero-sum gain.
Right.
Right? No harm. Because it was equal benefit to the other side of
True.
equal value.
True.
No, but you're right. So we shouldn't chuck it.
Right.
But maybe, okay, before we come up with some solutions, can we agree, though, that we are going to change the words that it says, and he shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons to, and he or she, right? Or yeah, just she. At least least we change it to be he or she, right?
All presidents from now forward will be women, and then we don't have to change.
Then just add an S, right? That's it. Okay, so you have an idea though.
Ooh, you put me on the spot. What's my
Remember
idea?
the idea?
I just said
The last term though.
Oh, yeah. So you shouldn't be allowed. Well, no, you explain it. You're on a roll. You're on a roll.
Yeah, but people don't want to hear me. They want to hear the hot woman too. Okay, so we talked about this at Five Guys,
Yes.
which is the first idea was don't let them do pardons within the last 6 months of their term.
Right.
So they can't do it and run, like this sneaky little thing, but then it would have to be on their last term. Right. Like Clinton did his pardon gate in 2001, the end of his last term. Right. So what we're saying is the last term, you can't do a pardon.
Right.
No pardon. I got an idea. No pardon in your last term without approval from the Senate.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm in with that.
That could be one idea.
That's fair.
Okay, what about this idea? What about...
And
Yeah?
there's what was the name of the department of the government that they're supposed to file the pardon?
Oh, it's like a pardon department of some sort.
Yeah.
All the paperwork goes through this department.
You cannot get a pardon unless you followed that process.
Yeah, you have to at least do that. Like, I guarantee you that Hunter did not have, he's not typing away, filling out the forms,
Right.
making his case. I'm really a good guy.
Yeah.
He just called his dad, right?
Right,
In fact, he
right.
didn't even have to call his dad. His dad just did it.
And dad can still wave the hand because
But at least then you got to fill it out.
Yes.
But no, it's more than that, though. Here's what we need. Okay, either you can't do it in your last term at all
Okay.
without approval from maybe the Congress, right?
Sure.
Not just Senate, but that's got to be a vote in the Congress, right? Or we could have a pardon committee that consists of 3 people.
Okay.
The president, the Senate majority leader,
Okay.
and the Senate minority leader. You got to get all 3.
Ooh.
Right?
That'll never happen, then you might as well not have it.
Well, no, because then it'll only happen in cases where it should happen.
That's true.
Right? It'll be what it's supposed to be. Now, what you're really saying is that there will be no more political pardons.
Right.
Right?
For example, the one that I like, the Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford.
Yeah, they could have gotten together and
That
said,
would've
look,
been
we
cool.
got to get this behind us,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that's...
It gets people to work together instead of dividing.
And you know that when your team is up to bat as the president,
Yep.
you want to be heard. That's why you got to get all 3.
I like that.
It's more
Put that in
cooperative,
there.
right? Okay, put that in my new law.
Yeah.
Okay. So...
with the S.
Yeah, the S and then that. Okay, so what do you think, Chris? How do you like that law?
I really like it, yeah. But I mean, in an ideal world, that's like the perfect situation. But I don't know if that's going to happen.
Oh, no, it's
No,
not
that's
going to happen
never
because we
happened.
need 3/4 of the states to ratify a proposed amendment, which has to happen with, I think, 2/3 of the, 2/3 majority vote in both the House and Senate, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be hard. But if all we have to do is get the S and the rule that a pardon... Now, and by the way, let me just say that that's not without precedent. in the states, there's an independent pardon board that doesn't even include the governor in 6 U.S. states. Because you know how I said you can get a pardon in the states as well by the governor.
Sure.
6 states, it's not even the governor, it's a pardon board, okay?
Okay.
There's some precedent there.
I like that.
In 22 states, there's a pardon board that includes the governor, okay? So now we're up to 28 states where there's essentially a pardon board, right? Then there's 19 states that it says the governor may consult with the board, okay? I don't think they do a lot of consulting with the board. And then there's a bunch of others that don't have any rules in place. It's just the governor.
Yeah.
But anyway, so my rule of you got the Senate majority and minority, and then you got the president.
Yep.
That could
I
work.
like that one.
Now,
I like that
at a minimum, we should say you can't pardon family members, you can't pardon friends and their families, you can't pardon financial supporters and their families, and you can't pardon partners, business partners and their families, right?
Like that got rid of a lot of people in politics.
I don't know.
You still want to pardon all those people?
I want to say I don't think you can.
Okay, how about my previous rule?
I like the previous rule.
Okay, so but what are you worried about with the other one?
Well,
How do you
I mean,
feel about it?
Would Gerald Ford have been able to pardon Nixon?
Yeah, he's not his friend. He's not his friend's family. He's not his business partner. Right? He's not a political contributor. Nixon wasn't a political
In
contributor.
his campaign.
Right, but he was a big supporter of Gerald
Yeah.
Ford.
Yeah.
In fact, I think that's how he got in there. He was
How can
like
you
the
say
chief
they're
of
not
staff, right?
friends? Yeah.
You just say, I don't know him, but
I mean, they bowl together. But, you know. Okay, you're right. He wouldn't have been able to. Okay,
wouldn't work.
let's take that one off
All
the
right,
table.
all right.
Let's go back to the rule, which is the president, and you get the minority and majority leaders of the Senate,
I like
and you
that.
need unanimous decision.
Yeah.
And it will take pardons down from like 1,000 down to like 3,
I like that one.
right? But they're all legit then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So we got a deal.
We got a deal.
Now we just have to convince the other 329,999,998 people of this.
Well, they're all watching. So.
It's of course. So we've just convinced probably half of them.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right. Anyway, great podcast, gang.
you. Thank
See
you.
ya. See ya.